I stand strong in my contention that if you hate yourself into change, then you're just going to get a future moment that's like held together by the thread of hate and doesn't have much range for you to exist outside of that.
Today I have the great pleasure of chatting with Cory Muscara on the podcast. Cory is a teacher, writer, keynote speaker, former monk, and author of the book Stop Missing Your Life. Cory is also a personal friend and spiritual guide of mine. I have found his teachings incredibly helpful in my own self-actualization journey. We had a great discussion and even gentle debate about topics of mutual interest, such as whether there is a true self, the value of self-connection, and the role of mindfulness in the self-actualization journey. This was a truly rich conversation with lots of insights that I'm sure you will benefit from. So without further ado, I bring you Cory Muscara. Cory Muscara! It is so great to have you on the Psychology Podcast again.
Thanks, Scott. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Has it really been 4 years since your book came out?
Late 2019, I think, was the last time I was on.
So much feels like it's changed since then. How have you changed since then? What has your own inner growth journey been like the last 4 years?
I got married
Oh,
during
wow.
that time.
I did know that.
I got to explore a lot of who Cory is in relationship and how Cory makes decisions from a place of alignment versus misalignment. What are the particular patterns and conditionings that Cory has that can lead him to make decisions that might not be from a deeper place of alignment, but out of patterns of conditioning, codependency, even people pleasing. So it's felt like a big strip down the last 4 years. And I think a lot of us have gone through that with the pressure cooker of the pandemic.
Definitely.
You have so much energy that's forcing you to go inward. It's kind of impossible not to see stuff. And you can either suppress that and create more anxiety or numbness around it, or you can let it cook you and open you up. And I was fortunate to be cooked a bit, and so it's been a wonderful 4 years and hard in many ways.
Yeah, and being your friend, I have seen some of that journey in real time.
Yeah, I appreciate your friendship during all of it, and I appreciate your friendship in general, Scott. I just very much love our talks all the time, and for those listening on the outside that only get to see Scott maybe through the podcast, this is one of the most genuine humans I've ever met, and you give that much more permission for me to express all the different layers of myself with just a lot of compassion and acceptance. So I've appreciated all the ways our friendship has grown over the years and continues to, and the journeys and the learnings that we're figuring out together.
Well, likewise, absolutely likewise, what you just said, and thank you. I do think that, and I will own this, I do think I am very human, and I think that brings with it a lot of pain and suffering, just to be honest. I also have trouble saying serious things without making them funny. So that's another issue of mine. But I am very human, and you are very human too. And I think that's something we connect around. Both of us don't like. I mean, you could say we don't like bullshit, but that's not quite it. We don't like inhuman. That often is correlated with bullshit, isn't it?
I think we both agree that we don't like personal growth or healing paradigms that exclude aspects of our humanity or add shame or guilt or any form of extra tension to what it means to be human. And if they're not moving you in a direction of more curiosity or acceptance or space for the many dimensions of what it means to be human, then they're probably leading you down a path of more compartmentalization, inner fracturing, and subsequently more suffering. And we both agree that we need to take responsibility for the different layers of our humanness and how they can create suffering for others. And so it's not about denying accountability or responsibility, but we both just seem to have an allergy to anything that creates more shame around those layers, and have just seen the futility of paths that take that approach.
That's very well said. I mean, like, when did you get so wise? Have you always, like, were you in like middle school walking around being like, you know, to love is to accept thyself, and all your friends are like, Cory, shut up. Like, have you
That's
always
why I
been
didn't
so
have any
wise?
friends. No, no. And I think I'll definitely look back 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and and probably see the incompleteness of different perspectives. Um, but yeah, I mean, when I was in college, you might remember my journey from what I talked about last time,
I
that
do.
I didn't get into this work for any noble reasons. I started meditating because I was trying to impress a girl. I had a hippie girlfriend in college. She was into meditation. I wanted her to think I was cool, so I started meditating. And then she broke up with me. And it was the pain of that breakup that actually kind of troubled me into a deeper conversation with myself and a deeper conversation with what are potential paths that lead to happiness, peace, relief, inner freedom. So it started out as a superficial undertaking, trying to impress a girl I was interested in. And then the pain of that led to some deeper inquiries. And I've just taken my type A personality into those deeper inquiries. And they take me into newer and richer layers of my humanness. And it's just been an incredibly beautiful, rich
But wait,
path.
who would break up with someone with those eyes?
How am I supposed to respond to that?
Okay, we'll move on. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, but I wasn't hitting on you, by the way. But I'm
It's
just saying,
okay if you were.
I'm just saying, who would break up with Cory? Um, I look, I've learned so much from you, and what I'm trying to understand is what am I learning from you? Because I'm a scientist, I learn a lot from my science, but I get something from you that I don't get from my science, and so I want to unpack that today.
Mhm.
I learn, I really do learn a lot from you, and I get a lot from learning what you've learned from your own experience and your own sort of um, really deep, extensive investigation of your own inner experience. So there's something that you're getting from that deep investigation that is helping me learn how to live my life in a way that I can't just simply get from reading peer-reviewed journal articles. So that I wanted to discuss that today because it is so interesting. Like I tend to, and that's rare for me. I tend to like data. I tend to like, I'm like, show me that if someone has a truth claim, I'm like, well, that's a truth claim. That should be tested. That should be investigated. I sort of just take what you say at face value, though, because it rings true. Often.
Yeah.
We'll get into for our free will disagreements later. But, yeah. What is it I get? What is it I'm getting from you?
Well, you tell me, and let's just start with maybe like the basic observable things in your experience, which is often the approach we take in meditation or these contemplative, less scientific traditions where you're understanding experience through direct observation. But at the beginning of the year, you did some of my teachings that seemed to
I did.
have a particular impact on you, and maybe you could start by
Profound.
describing
Profound
what some of
impact.
that shift was.
Yeah, profound impact. And I don't want to like sound like an infomercial for Cory Muscara, but profound impact. I started off the new year with a full 30-day uh, new you. What did you call it? What did you call it?
It's called the starting fresh
Okay, the
course,
starting fresh
letting
course.
go, reconnecting, and looking forward.
Yeah, well, all those things is what I did for 30 days, and there's something really profound that happens when you connect with yourself as it is day in and day out. Not I don't you think a lot of people connect with themselves, and we all do this, like we connect with like the version of ourselves that we like think we should be, or we connect
Hmm.
with the version of ourselves that, well, I guess there's no other way to put that, we think we should be. Yeah, like all the societal expectation, there's like the societal expectation self, and then there's like our actual experience. And Carl Rogers wrote about this a lot, and he called it congruency. And I think a lot of what you were teaching was congruency. I think Carl Rogers would have been proud of you
Hmm.
if you took your course. The humanistic psychologists were all about experience. I mean, this is a reason why I resonate to humanistic psychology, and why I even call myself a humanistic psychologist, is because they were a rare branch of psychology that wasn't all about the objective. They were also about the subjective. And so, yeah, so taking your course and really connecting with the actual experience in a non-judgmental way, in an accepting way, really helped me accept a lot of sides of myself that I've had shame over, or that I've been trying to ignore or repress. So that was super helpful in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we had been talking about that for probably a year leading up to that course as well, just riffing on our own regular talks about different aspects of ourselves that we might have more or less acceptance for. And I think a big part of what I've learned as a human, going through my own inner experience, and then as a teacher, is one, seeing how much resistance, suffering, shame we have toward different aspects of ourselves, that's learned over the course of our life, of parts of ourselves that are safe and okay to share, that might get us praise, connection, love, and other parts of us that are less safe to share, that maybe led to disconnection, or being made fun of, or being hurt. And so some of that we're conscious of, a lot of it we're not conscious of, but that ends up creating an inner experience that can often feel like we're at war with ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we're at war with ourselves, there's a lot of noise in the system. We have a lot of thoughts that are saying, like, you should be this way and you shouldn't be that way. Yeah. Oh, now you're good or now you're bad. And you get this bifurcation of good, bad, right, wrong. And I have just found that it creates a lot of agitation in the system. And one thing that I've found is that when there is a lot of agitation in the system, it's hard to know what voice to follow. And it's hard to even discern, is there even like a deeper voice or a deeper place of alignment that can serve as the backdrop for decisions that we make that might actually propel us toward greater freedom, inner spaciousness, and ease, versus more patterns of control or tension, suffering. And so a big part of the work I do is helping first make an internal container of permission for all the different parts of you to exist.
You do that well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And not to necessarily express, because there's some parts that have maybe been hurt, and if they were to just spill over onto the world, they could cause harm to other people. But for us to first have the capacity to hold internally with curiosity and compassion and non-judgment, so that we're not one, becoming our own worst enemy and trying to like force and will and hate ourselves into a better life, which tends to be the path. And I stand strong in my contention that if you hate yourself into change, then you're just going to get a future moment that's like held together by the thread of hate, and doesn't have much range for you to exist outside of that. And yeah, you might have like a certain peace and contentment, but it only exists within a very narrow alley of your ego self expressing in a particular way that matches the blueprint of some other facet of your ego self. And so that isn't freedom to me, or peace. That actually sounds like an inner prison.
Wow. Did you hear that, Mike? Holy shit. This guy is wise beyond his years. I mean that. You really are. I mean, it's like it's incredible. Amount of wisdom you drop in like a couple sentences. But I think that a lot of your audience, so in psychology we have internalizers and we have externalizers. We have those that have this inner turmoil and sort of externalize that and project it onto others and cause a lot of suffering and pain to others. And then there are others that have a lot of that inner turmoil and they really keep that spotlight inward. In all honesty, I'm a really big internalizer. And I've noticed taking your... I feel like for this episode, like it's not going to work if I'm not vulnerable. So I'm just going to go there. Taking your course made me realize how much of an internalizer I am. And I suspect a large majority of your audience are internalizers. This is just based on watching your audience. I mean, I know I get a pulse, from the Instagram, things. It's like I feel like a lot of them are internalizers. I don't see them as big acting out kind of people. So that really is kind of your audience. Are people like neurotic internalizers like me? And so you see a lot of it. Do you have advice for people like us who really, Maslow called it like fighting a civil war within yourself, is how he phrased it. But for people who feel like they're fighting, because I do feel like I fight this war within, I feel like there's one side of me that wants growth, and I feel like there's another side of me that wants to tear myself down. And I feel like I'm constantly, I have this duality, like throughout the course of every single day, the two are fighting with each other. Am I alone in that? Like, would you say are a large, sizable number of your audience? Do you hear something common like that?
Yes, I would say the majority have that tension
What the hell is
apart.
that? Like, why is there a side of me that wants to, like, take my successes and denigrate them in a way?
Let me turn that toward you for a moment and ask, how has that pattern served you in some way over the years?
It helps me when I get too overwhelmed with emails. I can say
Hmm.
I can tear myself down and then shut down, and like they all leave me alone.
Okay, and so what does the tearing down look like in a scenario like that?
Well, the tearing down side comes when I'm overwhelmed and
Hmm.
with the world because I'm very sensitive.
Okay, and the tearing down is toward you or wanting to tear it all
Well,
down
it's
externally?
yeah, no, it's a good question. Well, because I'm not an externalizer,
Hmm.
I'm saying I kind of take out my anger or whatever. I just take it out on myself because I don't want to cause harm to others.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. I mean, you could see the same path of someone who has my inner dialogue, but who's an externalizer and just says like "shut the fuck up" to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so this is one of the reasons why I say until you are able to hold the discomfort of life with presence and stillness, it will continue to push you into patterns that frustrate you with unconscious reactivity. And what you're seeing right now is like an uncomfortable experience arises with the email. It's a basic stimulus and response. Stimulus, the feeling of like this is too much, and that feeling of too much wants to relieve itself.
Yeah.
And so for some people, they relieve it by freezing, right? We can numb and shut down and zone out. For others, we can fight the world, and that's where people go to get into patterns of self-sabotage, maybe with their business or their work, of just like, F the world, I can't do this. I knew this wouldn't work anyway, and kind of blow it all up as a way to relieve the pain. Or in this case, you might direct it toward yourself, and it's maybe more of like an implosion. And that could be a form of trying to like force yourself to buck up and do it. Or it could be just a form of you trying to get rid of it by telling yourself like, this can't work, I knew it couldn't work, or I get angry at myself for not being good enough to do it, all to try to design in a way to shift something that will cause this to relieve itself. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why people have particular patterns in relationship to overwhelm, but they're usually some form of a learned survival strategy that we tend to lean toward one or others. For some of us, I have more of a freeze response where I just kind of like get quiet, don't want to do anything, zone out. Yeah, and other people have a freeze or a fawn, or sorry,
What's a
a
fun?
fight.
Oh, fight.
A fawn response would be kind of, it's almost like a people pleasing dynamic where you go above and beyond,
Oh, I see.
right? Where you might feel in relationship with an abuser or someone who's harmful to you, instead of fighting or freezing or running away, you go.
Did you invent that?
No. They're called the 4 Fs of survival strategies.
I've never heard of, yeah, but I've never heard fawn before.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense.
I want to give credit where it's due. I believe the person who created that also wrote the book Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. Okay. So for those who want to check that out, cool. But I'm not 100% sure. But yes, it is that it's the fourth F that's often misunderstood, and a lot of people fall into it. And you might even do this with like at work. People, it's not just like in a difficult relationship where you just try to be extra nice so that you get the response you're looking for. You might do it with your colleagues when they're not being nice to you. Instead of standing up for yourself or going like, I don't want to work here, you abandon yourself by becoming some version that you think they will like better. Right. And you might get a temporary reward hit from that. Maybe they're less mean to you, but you find like hours later just like, why do I feel yucky? Why do I feel disconnected from myself? So the fawn is a very common pattern, but they're all just reactions to stress. And that's why one of the first things to be able to work with that is can we hold the intensity within our nervous system without immediately reacting, or at least to be able to see to feel what that tendency is to react, and then start to work at that edge instead of immediately going into reaction.
Well, that's it. That's mindfulness.
Yeah, that's where mindfulness comes in a significant way as like a foundation.
Yeah. I bet you're a fan of that quote, between stimulus and response is that choice to decide. Whoever came up with that quote. But
well, you were the one who told me it wasn't Viktor Frankl.
It wasn't.
When you were reviewing my book. And you were like, this actually isn't Viktor Frankl. And since then, I've told many people it's not Viktor Frankl, and I receive a lot of hate. People are very attached to Viktor Frankl having said that quote, and he said some version of it.
He said, the general sentiment. But that sentiment, it does encapsulate a lot of mindfulness. But your book, I think, also encapsulates a lot of it, and the whole idea of like don't miss your life, because it'll fly by. It's just, I'm coming up on my 45th birthday in a couple weeks, and I'm just like, what the hell? Like, it just flew.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I don't want to miss any more of it.
And what are the times where you feel like you're really plugged in, and maybe not that it's slowing down, but you feel like, yeah, it went fast, but I was really there? Have you had experiences like that?
Definitely. And it's usually surrounding spending quality time with friends and family.
Yeah.
And writing. Yeah. Writing. Being in the flow state with a book.
Yeah. So deep immersion.
Yeah.
I've been finding, because I'm seeing it too. I'm 34 now, and
damn, you're catching up, bro.
I know. I'm trying to catch up, but you just keep moving forward as well. But the last 4 years, ever since I hit 30, it's just like a year feels like 6 months, and it's wild. But when I ask myself, like, was I there the last year? The response is yes. Like, I couldn't have asked for more. I couldn't have asked to show up. For certainly areas where I go on automatic pilot, but I have a lot of space for that just being part of the day-to-day. It is, as someone who spent a long time in a monastery trying to perfect moment-to-moment awareness, it is near impossible to sustain a continuity of presence throughout the day.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of space for the going in and the out and getting triggered and getting caught in those spirals for a while. But overall, like, the intention is to be here for my life, and it's moving fast, but I feel like I'm showing up with as much sincerity as I can. And I think that's all we
can do.
We can ask.
That's all we can do. Are you a fan of Eckhart Tolle?
I haven't gone into his work in a long time. I do believe he's on something.
Like drugs?
Deep. Yeah, no. he's in the channel.
He's on something.
He's in a particular channel that is, let's say, non-egoic.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I struggled with a bit when I read some of it, like when I read The Power of Now, was I felt like he was transmitting some deep wisdom with not enough footholds or rungs of the ladder to grasp onto for how to move in that direction, which a lot of teachers do. And it's fine. It's a way to teach. You kind of just transmit the truth of the thing that you're connected to. But I found that I needed more like step-by-step instructions for how to get there.
I gotcha.
Do you like Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a lot of I see a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
I want to read this text. I'm going to read a bunch of texts that I get daily from you, but I don't feel special because you're sending these texts out to all your followers. As you know, I really do practice not being a victim to things or holding a victim mindset. And so I was really delighted to see this text from you where you say, don't be a victim to your past self. Learn, be accountable, have self-compassion, and keep moving forward. Very in line with a new project that I'm working on, which I'll announce soon. But this idea of don't be a victim to your past self, is it possible for that to be the case, even if other people won't let you move on from your past?
Well, that I believe to be, I would call it a deep spiritual practice where you do the work of forgiving yourself when other people won't forgive you. And it's important to first note that forgiving yourself is not denying responsibility for your actions. I think the first step to an actual healthy self-forgiveness is meeting deeply honestly, and that often comes with a lot of pain of where you were potentially unconscious and caused harm, and to feel the harm and the pain that you caused for another person. Then that can happen in friendship, in partnership, at work, but just in general. And that the willingness to meet that honestly and to see what your actions have caused is a big piece of what allows for learning and healing whatever part it was that created that harm. However, there can be points in relationship, especially a partnership, where you can take responsibility and you can have looked deeply in yourself and you saw where you were unconscious and where you created harm, and you're sorry for it deeply, and you go through a lot of loops of showing up for the other person, sharing where you were wrong and what you've learned and where things are different, and they are still in the pain of it, and they want to keep you as the perpetrator so that they can still dwell in the power of the victim. And if that's a new concept for people, it might not make sense. Like, where do you get power from being a victim? But when you're hurt, and when you're sad, and when there's been a violation, and there's a powerlessness to that feeling. And one of the ways that you can help buffer against the powerlessness of that is to make another person wrong, so that it puts you in a particular role of, they did that to me.
That's right.
And the anger is an easier form of suffering than the suffering of sadness, or a more powerful form of suffering than the suffering of sadness. So, there comes a point where if you've done the work, where you're clear in yourself, or as clear as you can be, that I am looking as honestly as I can, I've checked myself, I've taken responsibility, but now we're at a point where it's clear this other person doesn't want to let me off the hook because they still have their journey, then that's where I say it becomes a pretty deep spiritual practice. So let's just say like a deep personal growth practice, to do the work of holding a forgiveness for yourself while others externally are not. And that's also where we can get victimized, and that's where this quote came from, where we can be victimized by our past self, and our past self did something, and then we just feel like we can't move forward, or we can't allow ourselves to be happy again or feel peaceful again, because of something our past self did. And so we need to continue to wallow in the pain of us being, I'm bad. Yeah, I'm bad. I don't deserve anything good. Like that is not, that's not a high ground. That's not maturity. That's that's fear of doing the work, actually, of how difficult and painful it can be to hold yourself in forgiveness, hold your past self in forgiveness, because we're just so deeply socially wired for connection with others, and I find that many people, they don't actually want to be let off the hook. People want to take some accountability for what they did if they're given an opportunity to do so in relationship. But yeah, it's tricky because you have two people, and in this particular scenario, there tends to be a lot more understanding and compassion for the person who was hurt rather than the person who caused hurt, and that's where this stuff becomes quite tricky. But you'll never move toward healing if there's not a willingness to hold the person who created pain, through the lens of who they are now, and through their willingness to be honest and accountable and responsible. And I just see a lot of that happening globally and culturally right now.
Wow. One of my favorite quotes is the Irving Yalom quote: "Sooner or later, you have to give up hope for a better past."
Yeah, I like
Seems
that definition of forgiveness.
relevant to this.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of your texts are very compassionate. If you're not letting people off the hook, like you say, you will make mistakes in life, big ones. Maybe that's the whole text. Maybe sorry. The whole thing is, you will make mistakes in life, big ones. Don't be a victim to your past self. Learn to be accountable, have self-compassion, and keep moving forward. I mean, yeah, you already explained that you're not letting people off the hook. Yeah, you just made that clear. Wow, there's so many. I want to pick some of my favorites. Let's pick one that maybe we can debate a little bit. Which is the one
for everyone listening, Scott will often send me messages. Like, sometimes they're like, "Oh, I loved this one. I resonate so deeply," and then the next day it'll be like, "I don't agree with this one at all. What do you mean by this?"
It's true.
And that's part of the beauty of our relationship. We have a lot of range to dig into stuff.
It's true.
So,
it's very true.
And it's wonderful.
Let me read this one to you, because it, on first blush, stood against everything I think is true.
Yeah.
You said and I'll unpack that, and you can tell me. It probably comes down to terms. Your true self is already whole. It can't be further perfected. It holds all your wisdom and peace. Thus, our path is to unwind back into ourselves. I 100% want you to explain yourself. Yeah. But before you do, let me just say what triggered me with that one. Because I think it's good in these kind of discussions to say, well, what did I project onto you there? Because a lot of that, I don't know if it's what you really meant. So for me, I've said things, in podcasts and in my writings, that I really roll my eyes when I see self-help books be like, "You are great, you are perfect just the way you are," and it holds no accountability whatsoever for someone's life or responsibility for someone's life. Because none of us are perfect just the way we are. We all have work to do. We all have growth to happen. And also the idea of the true self, I've argued, there is no true self, that we all contain multitudes, and there may be our best selves, and our not so best selves, but we need to take responsibility for our whole self if we're ever going to grow, not just say the true self is really me and all the bad stuff is not me. So that's another aspect of this. So those are two big aspects that triggered me. So where is that, when I say that, please let me know where I've got maybe projected onto you what you maybe you didn't even mean what I'm thinking you meant, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there is a limitation and often a loss in translation with terms. So we can start by acknowledging that, and also character limits. Those texts I can only
Yeah.
squeeze in 160 characters, which often frustrates me tremendously.
Yeah.
I don't think we're too far off. First of all, I cringe at all the same things that you
Really?
cringe at.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
And so where the text that I'm sharing here actually doesn't feel antithetical to what you shared. I think there might be a layer of it that we can build on that's different, but I don't agree with this idea, or I don't purport the idea that everyone is just perfect as they are, and therefore you don't have to take accountability and responsibility. When I say that there's a place in you that is fundamentally whole, I'm referring to that I believe there's a distinction between parts of ourselves, which you might say are some of the multitudes that Walt Whitman was referencing, that represent that have anger.
He was citing
that might
me.
Have shame.
He was citing
my
work.
That's what I heard. Right. So we have these multitudes, and they can cause joy and fun and pleasure, and they create aspects of a personality structure, and they can cause harm, and they're often ignorant, and they're young, and they're developing, and so it's important for those parts to be massaged and educated and developed in a particular way. The aspect of the self, like that I'm saying is fundamentally whole, right? So this has come from my own direct experience, but is also echoed from even people like you've had on this podcast, like Richard Schwartz, where he
pushed back against him when he was on the show.
So I'd be curious where you push back on there. I still think it is one of the most incredible things in psychology. One, internal family systems, I think, is one of the most incredible models in psychology, but also offers one of the most direct bridges between the contemplative traditions and the psychological traditions, where he was working with people in the depths of their suffering, who were were in pain, didn't want to live anymore, and could identify that the origins of those desires and patterns were parts of them, were parts of the person that had developed as protective or managerial aspects to get certain needs met, or to feel something, or to not feel something. And that when those parts stepped aside, when they felt safe enough to step aside, that there was an expression in that person that felt fundamentally them. Like they all described, this feels more me. And it feels characterized by things like calm, courage, certain confidence, compassion, clarity. And so, right, and then like he's seeing that with now thousands of people, that everyone seems to have that space when these parts step aside, that there's something consistent there. So that to me is incredibly interesting. Now we have to ask the question, if we take the perspective that everyone's different and has all these expressions, but when all of those expressions subside and all those patterns subside, that there's something that we can measure and see, even just qualitatively, that's consistent. Wow. Well, that starts to match up with what a lot of the spiritual traditions, contemplative traditions, have been saying as well, that you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions, you're not your sensations. There's a place that resides beneath all of that, or around all of that, or imbued in all of that.
Where is that
that's
place?
Different. It's above my pay grade to like point to a part of my body and say where it is, or to even say that it's within my body. What I will say is, like, the time that I've spent probably a year now, a year's worth of time in silent retreat, 6 months as one chunk, and then since then, lots of different smaller silent retreats. And in those retreats, all I'm doing is cultivating an awareness of my direct experience as I can observe. So I'm watching thoughts come and go. These thoughts that feel so me. I have this thought of like, I'm really hungry right now. It's like, yeah, Cory, we are hungry. Let's go eat something. Or I'm a bad person. I shouldn't have done. And you indulge in that. It just feels so you. That it's what I find every time is like the more I give space to just watch that come and go, the less those thoughts actually feel like me, and the more there's like a place that's observing the experience, that one that's even able to observe the experience, which already indicates that there's a separation between the content and or the object and the subject. But when I dwell in that space of the observer, that I feel more me, and not just more me. I feel it's the life that it's like irreducible. It has the resonance of irreducibility. It can't go any further, can't go any deeper. It doesn't want to go any deeper. It has the resonance of completeness. It's inarguable. I don't need to shout it from the rooftops to defend it or make it real. It's just like true unto itself. And that, if we could take, like, throw all the spiritual stuff aside and just say, like, if there's the possibility that that place exists within us, and that many people, it seems like almost every person can get to that place, doesn't it make sense to try to lead our lives more from that place? And so if we can at least agree on that, then it starts to bring into question, like, well, maybe that serves as an inner compass that holds everything for what will give us peace, fulfillment, and even wisdom for how to inform the decisions that we make. Are the decisions we're making coming from the backdrop of that place, or are they coming from the backdrop of the people pleaser part of me that's like, oh, I should go into this relationship because I don't want to make this person feel bad if I don't go on a third date with them, or I should have this conversation with this person because if I don't, they'll think I'm a bad person, even though there's something in the background in me that like has no energy for this whatsoever. Most of us are trying to optimize our lives through those patterns. We're basically becoming like more the biohacked, optimized versions of our like best managerial and protector parts, rather than seeing like, is there something, a place beneath all of that that can actually serve as a compass? And I come to this conversation and this inquiry and anything I've found with a ton of humility. It's come from my own deep despair and frustration and not knowing what to do, including the times after I came back from deep silent retreat. I still hadn't had it all integrated yet. And so it wasn't until I hit moments in my life where I genuinely did not know how to make a decision for something, and where's the place in me that will inform this decision? How do I know I can make a decision from a place that's actually going to be toward my highest good? What even is my highest good? Yes. And that's what led to this really deep inquiry and parsing and separating all of the noise from this like soft, quiet impulse. And then I've found that other teachers have been talking about this, and even psychologists like Dick Schwartz have said like, maybe there's a framework even for understanding this.
Yeah, I had an insight. Thank you so much for explaining that. I had an insight because I mean, I have my own framework, and I realize it's just a difference in the metaphor, but we're talking about the same thing. You keep talking about beneath it all, and I talk about rising above it all. And that's the difference. That's why I'm getting hung up on it, because your metaphor is different than the way I think about it. I see it as transcendence as opposed to peeling away everything to get to a true core. So that was good. Like, it was really good to hear you talk about this, because it made me realize you kept using the language of underneath it all, whereas I don't use that language. But I'm with you on, I want to get people to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
Look. Me and you, we want to get people to the same place. I think that maybe we just think about it differently in terms of, I think the real self, I think it's pernicious to think that the true self of you is really that pure loving place, and that all these other parts of you are not the true you. They are true you. I do think it's all true. It's all true. But I think that we can transcend those lower selves. And I think we have higher selves, But it's interesting because you then flipped at the end and you said something like higher, and I was like, oh wait, he changed his metaphor for a second there.
Did I say
You
higher?
did, you really did. We'll
Well,
rewind the tape.
yeah. So this is I'll
He's
be the first to acknowledge the complications of language and the flip flopping of language
Yeah.
for me. And I'm sure, like I wrote a tweet 4 years ago that was basically a cry for let's get rid of the term higher self, because it suggests that there's aspects of us that are good and then aspects of us that are bad, and that if we're trying to move toward a place of more wholeness and integration, that language implicitly creates separation.
Judgy.
Yeah, I've come around. I've landed more on true, but it is because I do believe there's a place within us that and this is why I'll share why I don't use words like transcend as much, or I might say like descend, come back to ourselves, is because I do believe that core self has a gravitational pull, and that everything, the patterns that we've developed over a lifetime are actually that are patterns that are scared of being that true self, that have learned when we just allow ourselves to be and express and be curious, as we were maybe when we were kids, that there were certain needs that didn't get met, or we did something from that place that caused our parents to yell at us, and then we learned like, oh, when I just allow myself to be, that's not okay. So who do I have to be for them? Oh, I have to be someone that works really hard and is quiet. So that, I would say, is a version of it takes energy to put that pattern in place. And let's just call it like a people-pleasing pattern or a working hard pattern. And I almost imagine it as like a ball with a core, and then like little spirals that are spiraling away from that. And the spiraling away are like the learnings and the patterns of who we need to be in order to get these other needs met from other people in the world, like safety, love, and connection. So my experience has been that the system is kind of exhausted by those patterns. It's exhausted by the people pleasing. It's exhausted by the working hard, the working hard from a place of like, I need to be good in order to get praise. That's different than working hard from a place of alignment where the energy just is pushing you. And so when you...
Path of least resistance is what you use,
Yeah.
how you define true self.
Yeah, I like that. And so I think for a lot of people, there's, for almost all of us, there's actually an unwinding phase where we have to do less rather than more to let ourselves come back down to that irreducible core self. And the energy I feel imbued in the word transcend has like a going up quality. And I get what you're pointing to and what most people are pointing to when they say that. But I actually find, and it has been the case for me, the path to that place within myself has been more of like a letting go and surrendering
Descending.
quality. Yeah. And then the descending just happens naturally. And it takes me through layers. It might take me through layers of anger. Like if I don't prop up my feeling of like, I should do this good opportunity, and then I go, okay, I guess I'm not going to do that. Then I'm going to go through a layer of fear. Then I might go through a layer of anger. Then I might go through a layer of sadness. Then I might go through a layer of despair. And then all of that, which are like protective patterns of what would happen or who would I be, or if I just like let go and trusted this soft knowing, once I cycle through all of that, then I get to this place that's quiet and still. And it's just like, yeah, this is what feels aligned. And I'm just trying to live more of my life from that place, and it seems others gravitate toward it as well when they're given the invitation.
I gravitate towards it. I like it. Sign me up. Sign me up. Whether or not we're going up or down, I don't give a fuck where we're going. Let's go. Let's
Go
go.
to the Holy Land.
Let's go. Yeah. Well, it's like it gets pedantic. Are we going up or are we going down? But isn't it kind of interesting though to actually discuss that?
Oh,
Because I don't think either of you are definitely right. I think the jury's still out on what the best language is for it, and I'm open to rethinking my metaphor,
Yeah.
for sure. Are you open to rethinking yours too?
Yes, definitely the metaphor. So when you asked me the other day over text, you
Mm.
were like, you said, I can't tell if you're actually open to changing your position, which I think is great. Like you have to start from that place in a debate. And
Yeah.
what I'll always say is,
Yeah.
one, like I'm very open to being humbled big time, and like I am
Mm.
just interested in truth, whatever that is, and it probably has a lot of layers. I've experienced it having a lot of layers, but I am here for life to crack me open, and it's kind of like an agreement I've made with myself. And if that means being like publicly shamed or saying something on a large platform like this and being wrong, like I will own that wholly. I will say though, when you feel me when we're debating, I'm open to the language being off. The things that I hold with a certain steadiness are like direct experiences that I've touched that feel like they have a universal truth to them. Which, like, to give an example of something like that that might not have science to back it up, that could come from meditation. You directly observe that if you try to put your refuge of happiness in something that is inherently impermanent, you are not going to find a stable ground. And that's what many people try to do. And so
Yeah.
meditation like gives you an insight, just as an example of like everything's impermanent. So if you try to hold any single moment as a refuge, right?
Yeah.
So that's an example of something that I would say like that I've experienced as a direct truth, and other people have experienced as a direct truth. It's possible it's off, but there's like a fundamental law that makes it so. So the things that I'm sharing and observing, they're not like frameworks that I've put together as like this is my idea. They're stemming from core truths like that seem core, and I'm open to certain ones being slightly off. But I don't I really try not to make strong claims unless they're coming from something like that would require like an alternative reality for it to shift.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Yeah, no, it's a really interesting discussion whether or not uh, by overcoming because I think our default response is usually fear and ego. And so I'm trying to think this through. When we are inhibiting, you're saying like we get through this, we get through this, we get through this. Is it going up or down? I'm
Right.
getting hung up on this because I don't know the answer. And I don't. So I want to like really keep thinking about this because I've never actually had this discussion with anyone in my field about this. So thank you for stimulating in me.
And when you went
Yeah.
through the 30-day course this year, did you feel and you like came back, it felt
Yeah.
like you were more you, or you felt more spacious and free? What was the language I would use, and we could change the language. I would say I would ask you like what was the energetic experience of that? But I think a different way to phrase that could just be um, did you feel like you were sinking more into yourself, or you were
No, I
expanding
transcended.
up?
I
Okay.
felt like I was expanding, and I
Cool.
felt like I was transcending. When I see the reason why descending doesn't see this is also the importance of not taking your own personal experience as as the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another thing I wanted to discuss. I was really excited to talk about all this stuff with you today, because there's there's I mean if as scientists we just believed what everyone said is their experience and said, oh, well, therefore that's the truth, then we would never discover the truth, because there are generalizable truths and sometimes they're outliers too. So sometimes, I would say like it's an interesting, what do we do with that? Your inner experience is telling you you're descending, and for me, I feel like when I am descending, what is happening is that I'm spiraling downward into fear and panic.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a descending. To me, and I also think it's important we don't project onto each other, because we're different people, and my inner experience is different than your inner experience, and that's why as well I don't want to I'm not so keen on, even if I've done an investigation of my own inner experience for like 10 years, still I would be wary personally of generalizing that, because you don't have the same inner experience as I do of a constant pervasive sense of anxiety and dread. At least I don't think you do, and maybe I'm wrong, but I've suffered with generalized anxiety disorder my whole life. So for me, to descend more and more is to get in touch with that self more and more, and I don't like that.
And I would actually, what I would say when I hear that, and also just from my framework or frame of mind, that kind of descending, or the experience that arises with that experience of descent, I don't actually take as a reason to avoid that kind of descending. I think actually most forms of descending back into yourself involve a huge amount of panic
Just
and
getting in
fear
touch
and
with that.
anxiety.
Do you ever have existential dread?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I navigated a lot of it when when I spent a lot of time in a monastery. So a lot of like the big existential fears, I feel like I cycled through. But yeah, I still have existential dread. I still have like just the general fear that comes with being a human in like a whole lot of unknown.
Well, we're really on to something big here, Cory.
Yeah.
We really are. I see what you're saying. I was at the Apple store this morning because I woke up and accidentally dropped my water all over my laptop. And so I was feeling dread and anxiety, and I made a Genius Bar appointment. And this morning I was essentially having a panic attack on the way to the Apple store. And as I was sitting there in the Apple store, I've learned at this point to be very good. I use all the tools that I have the tools, right? So I have all the tools I need to be able to handle and cycle, as you say, cycle through it in a way that 10-year-old, not even 10 years ago, Scott would have had great difficulty doing. So I've learned a lot of these tools. I view them as add-on tools, that I've really learned. And so, I'm just thinking, because it's like, when we use language like, oh, just get in touch with your already perfect self. No, I had to learn. I had to add on those tools. I had to learn how to regulate it wasn't just as easy as like, oh, I didn't have to do all that work the last 10 years. I could have just read Cory's tweet and just have told myself, oh, all I have to do is just get in touch with that perfect part of me, and then I would have been fine. I guess that's why I'm reacting to it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to see much more clearer what you're saying. I like what you're saying, and I'm also holding this other stuff there as well. Yeah.
So I definitely think you can create self-regulatory internal infrastructures by adding to the system, and using,
Cool.
let's just
So
say,
there's
like,
still work there. To
yeah,
do.
like a managerial part, as Dick Schwartz would say, that might do something like scheduling our anxiety. Just like, okay, I'm really nervous right now because I'm thinking about this interview I have to do 3 days, and we just talk to the mind, like we use a skill and say like, hey mind, yeah, I know this is intense, but how about we focus on this? We worry about this tomorrow for an hour. And then like you use a strategy like that, which is basically just like reorganizing the internal system to defer the energy to another point in time. Might not necessarily do anything fundamentally to shift how the mind is held within a larger context of being human, but it can work. It's a tool. What I would also say, though, is there's that space of like being fundamentally whole where it serves in this, and where I've felt it serve in moments where what I would call is like my ego self that's basically terrified of making the wrong decision or doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing or being humiliated, right? That part like can't do life that well. That part like arose from fear that I'm not safe, people don't love me, I'm not good enough. So it's constantly operating out of fear.
Yeah.
This other place that it does require some subscribing to that it exists in yourself, and that's why like you don't have to take any of it at face value. Like you can do the practices and see the people who have talked about this for millennia now, that there is that place within you. that place doesn't have this same fear of I'm not good enough. It like has safety imbued into it. When you're there, you don't feel like you need to defend yourself. You feel
I agree.
fundamentally connected.
We
Right.
call them self-transcendent experiences, though.
Right. So what I would say is a big part of healing, and you could even call it reparenting, is when that fear-based part, that younger self part, is held and surrendered into the arms of that core self. And that has a fundamental, at least in my experience of it, the energetic experience of it is one of like letting go and softening. And because the resonance of that core self space is, it doesn't have this like pushing energy. It's just relaxed and spacious, like a bale of hay where you've snipped the twine and it just spread out. And so what I've been playing with in the last years is, what is it like when I feel that part that wants to manage and control and do my life and is afraid, just like, no, we have to do this reason, because if we don't, then we're going to hurt this person or they're not going to like us. And I've just seen the futility of that. Just like, what if I just met that part and then felt that other space that's behind, that's quiet and calm, and just say, what if you just let go and just let this other part hold you and hold the burden of having to do life. And there's something in that part that then softens in that moment, and it gives way to this other wisdom. And I would say that, like, that process has a fundamental repair quality that can then carry you into future moments where that anxiety attack might arise, but not arise in the same way, because the part that was extra anxious felt alone and isolated, and then recruited some other managerial parts to help it. Like, what do we do in this moment? And it can work, but it might not be addressing, and I would argue isn't addressing the core repair of where that anxiety might be coming from.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating that. I could see a reframing here that might be helpful to a lot of people. Then, rather than self-transcendence, maybe me and you can write a book together someday on what it is. It seems like what is happening here, if I step into your head, is we are learning. Here are the tools that we're teaching you to actually connect with yourself. It's not like maybe there's like, it's not self-transcendence. It's, there are so many things that we do to to move us in the direction of fear, ego, all these sides of our, I would say, true sides of ourselves that we don't enjoy being in, and which we don't feel authentic. By the way, I wanted to push back earlier and say, just because something doesn't feel authentic doesn't mean it's not truthfully authentic. So that's another distinction I wanted to make to you, because you can't just use the argument to me that, like, oh, well, it feels, so therefore that's true. Well, I'm like, no, we delude ourselves all the time.
Yes, and I would say you can get to refined levels of this, where even something that's scary and uncomfortable, you can still sense when it has the resonance of being in alignment or coming from that deeper place.
I see. So you're okay. Good. This is really good. So you actually, I finally have something I can attach to your use of the word true, and that's an alignment.
Yeah.
There we go.
Right.
There we go. Now I get it, because I don't know what true means.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a nerd. I'm a scientist. I look in the brain and I'm like, it's not like we see brain areas and we're like, that's the true brain. Like, as a cognitive scientist, to be like, oh, that brain activation is true. That brain activation is not true. Yeah. That doesn't make any damn sense to me. Totally. But I actually see what you're saying. Yes. Look, that's huge. That really is huge, because when we feel in alignment, we really do tend to feel there is an integrity, I would say, between who we really how we want to experience ourselves, and the way the world is giving us that experience. Yeah. And that is beautiful. That is, I'm right there with you, and I love your exercises and thoughts on the importance of alignment. And so now I see you really do equate alignment with when you use the word true.
Yeah.
To you, true is aligned.
Yeah. I'll probably retire the word true. There's a
You don't
lot
have
of,
to on my behalf.
well, in general, because like
Yeah.
my academic friends, and I'm not that far. I've like spent a decent amount of time in academia, not to the level you have, but like I have respect
Yeah.
for it. And I've also just found the limitations of it, where I think in the last couple of years, I've just gone more in the, this is my felt sense of things, and this is the language I'd put on it. But true is a complicated word, and
Yeah.
I'm always struggling and working to find the language that speaks to the thing that you lose as soon as you put language on it,
Yeah.
and therefore I make a lot of space for its ongoing evolution.
Yeah, and I feel like I get you, and I feel like you get where I was coming from, getting hung up on the word true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we both kind of get each other, even I think much better even than we were an hour ago. What do you think?
Yeah, we might even like each other more now.
I didn't know if that was possible.
Yeah. Who knew? No, totally.
I was already
It's great.
kind of at a ceiling. I was at a ceiling with you, but apparently not the other way. No, I'm joking. Thanks, Cory. This was really a really wonderful chat. I've learned so much from you, and I do feel like there's a lot for people to really think through and to apply in their own lives. It's like, it's where it's at. Alignment, self-connection, love.
Yeah.
It's like, that's life. What more do you want out of life
Yeah. Right.
than those three things?
Right. And maybe I think that's just like a good note to close on as well. Like when we're talking about how do you know what's aligned in the place in your life to lead from? I mean, this is where it takes some time to get close enough to yourself to be able to discern what are the things, the ways that I'm leading my life that actually don't feel good, and what are the ways that are almost inarguably good, and that I can then track along other people's experiences as well. Like there's something about love and internal spaciousness and the feeling of being integrated and whole that just feels true. And what if I just let that serve as the backdrop for how I lead my life? How much different would it be than letting fear and control and trying to be good in other people's eyes constantly be the backdrop? And I think if you just start there, you're going to be on a really rich ride of life.
I think so. I agree. That's isn't that a big part of the self-actualization journey?
Yeah.
To use my shtick.
Yeah.
To bring in my shtick for a second. I mean, isn't that's a big part of the self-actualization journey is constantly aligning yourself to where you are now, which might not be where you were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like I think 10 years ago there are certain choices and things I made that I don't want to make anymore, but I think it was in alignment 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Big
it's a
time.
constant process, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Another reason why I don't like the idea of the true self, because it connotes we're kind of born with this unalterable essence that we just have to get in touch with. But
And
I just realized that's another reason why that terminology triggered me. I realized a lot today.
yeah, it's cool. And I could see how that could be triggering, and I could also see how maybe one day it could be really beautiful and inviting, where you can hold both. You can hold all the parts of you that can improve and adjust, and maybe what they're doing is like reorganizing themselves to actually make space for the Scott, the essential Scott that's been there all along, to have more permission to come through.
Yeah, well, hey, I think both are possible. Yeah. There can be both parts of ourselves. Yeah, that's also an interesting thing. Is how much do you want to accept, and how much do you want to really change? Accept. Well, I think we should accept everything, but how much do we want to accept and change, and how much do we want to accept and accept?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That might be another podcast episode.
another one.
Yeah.
To be continued.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cory.
Thanks so much,
Thanks for
Scott.
being on
Always
the
a joy.
podcast. Always.